Okay, the bitrate is up. Hi everyone, today we're going to talk live with a new webcam, new green screen. We're going to do all that kind of funky jazz. We're going to talk about how to get a decent heavy guitar tone, essentially for free. Yes, you can get better guitar tones before anyone says anything, but that's not the point of this video. The point is, hey, say you've got a guitar, you've got a recording interface and a laptop or desktop of some kind. You don't have the money for a tube amplifier, you don't have the space to run one at volume, you don't have the money for a modeler like a Kemper or an Axe-Fx, let's not even talk about Pod. So what we're going to look at is doing this in a DAW and how exactly we're going to do that. So what we have in front of us is Reaper, which, as you may know if you've seen any of my videos, is my favourite DAW and is my workstation of choice. The main thing for you guys is that this is free for 60 days, no iLok, no nothing. If you do decide that Reaper is right for you, then you can buy it for, I think it's $40, $45, something like that. It's really not much. And it's roughly equivalent in the UK. I'm from the UK. It was through PayPal, £35, something like that. Which, considering I think this is genuinely better than Pro Tools, absolute bargain. And the inbuilt plugins are absolutely great, and we're going to use one of those today. So if you've seen the challenge accepted videos that we did recently, those are the guitars and the track that we're going to be using today from my friend Lee. We've got 6-string, 7-string and 8-string tracks. Now if I just play the 6-string, let's play it with the Hughes and Kettner Warp 7. This is how it sounded. So that's a Hughes and Kettner Warp 7 as a real amp through a real cab, yada yada yada. So that's what we're not going to be doing today. But the way that we did these videos is that we recorded DI tracks at the same time as going through to real amp, so we could then reamp. But because of that, we have these. If I turn all these effects off, I'll come back to what effects I'm actually using later on. Stand by. So, like it or not, that is what a guitar sounds like without distortion, without an amplifier, just completely clean. That's an Epiphone Les Paul with EMGs, and that's how they sound. This is a 7-string with a laced Death Booker, and this is a Seymour Duncan pickup 8-string. As you can hear, that sounds a lot more farty. That's generally because 8-string strings can't handle that kind of floppy tension, and it comes through the pickup sound like that. And as you can see here, when it sounds farty, it's nowhere near clipping. It's nowhere near digital distortion. So that sound is not the inputs that I have going over. That's actually the sound of the pickups. It's a much more controlled sounding 7-string. So the way that I get free tones is I start by thinking, what kind of amp do I want to use? What kind of tone am I after? Is it metal? Is it rock? And let's just switch so you can see what's going on over here, and I'll reveal this bit by bit. So if you're doing it the free way, you have to think of your amp head and your cab separately. So the heads I use are usually by Poulan. It's a French dude. Let's just type that out on the screen for you there. So let's add text. So that's Poulan. Come on. That is awful. XSplit. There we go. So yeah, Poulan is a French guy who makes these emulations, and the one that I used for this is his amp called the what was he doing? Float the FX configuration. There we go. So this is the Poulan Lecto, as you can see on the screen. Lecto, Recto. It's a Mesa Dual Rectifier clone. Now, what I've done, let's just solo one side. And why is it? It's behaving rather strangely today, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's because I'm trying to stream. But so let's have a look. That's how a dual rectifier would sound if you managed somehow to just plug the power amp section straight into an interface and record. That would blow an interface up in real life. But that is how it would sound if you were able to do that. And actually, it is technically possible if you've got the kind of DI box that can take a speaker output on a feed through. You would still need to feed through to a cabinet to take the load, or a load box. But this is how a rectifier would sound in metal. If you were gonna go for a metal, a more kind of rock kind of tone, you would throw in Poulan's Hybrid, which looks like this. That's based on a Marshall JCM 800 or a Plexi on a switch, which is pretty useful. Just get rid of that. But today we're talking metal. I mean, yes, there are different amp sims out there, but some of them cost a considerable amount of money, and Poulan stuff is free. Completely free. I mean, arguably there's better out there, but not for free. Come on, it's free. And completely free, all the time. Unlike Reaper, where after 60 days you're supposed to pay, yada yada. Lecto and Hybrid, free. And they sound like a bag of bees because there's no speaker. So I got myself a kind of basic sound, and then I pull out the big guns. And the big guns for me is 2 notes, wall of sound. If you've heard of 2 notes before, the Torpedo, that's the hardware units that can emulate the Torpedo Cab, or Live, or Studio. They're fantastic units, but they cost several £100 or several $100. Maybe even up to $1,000 or more for the top of the range one. What you can do if you have the speaker sound already is go into their Wall of Sound plugin, which again is free, I think, if I remember rightly. You get 30 days of use, and it comes with a couple of cabs. If you buy one single cab, which I think is €8, Wall of Sound is then yours to use forever. So you buy one cab, and the whole thing is then essentially paid for, and the only thing you pay for after that is any different guitar cabinets that you want to buy. And each cab comes with a selection of microphones, and you can change all sorts of things about it. So when you bring this up, so let's just undo all my beautiful work. Let's just see if I can save this. Lecto 1. Okay, so when it comes up by default, it comes up with all the controls that you can see are completely flat. It comes on a Brit Vint C, which is a British cab, Marshall cab. Vintage C is vintage 30s in a closed-back cab, which is what most of the rock and roll guys are going to use. And it sounds, with the 7-string, like this. It's pretty good. There are little things that I like to change about it, but not that much. So my thing that I do with this is I bought his Rectifier cab, or their Rectifier cab, which is a Rectifier Mesa cab. That then sounds like this, which is more aggressive. I personally never use one microphone on a cab because it sounds too sharp. I like to use two. So the link in the middle, I unlink them. I've put the pans to 0 already. And I never tend to put mics in the center of the speaker either. I like to have just 10 or 15% away from the center is usually the edge of the dust cap in the middle, and that's where I tend to get my favorite tones. There is the Verify, which if you have two microphones on a cab, they're very rarely perfectly lined up. So, I mean, they can be very, very, very close, but that tiny sub-millisecond difference suddenly somehow makes everything sound kind of 3D. You've got to make sure, if you are in phase with your guitar tones, you're probably at the point where this would be a couple of percent Verify, which is subtly different to the point of being pretty much there. Now, the second mic, if we look at that, if I move that away from the center as well, and then change the microphone, this is where it gets interesting. The overload as well, just to cover that quickly, I like to add a little bit of the overload, which is where your preamps would just start to saturate a little, and it just adds a little realism. So if I hit play again, the classic kind of rock configuration is an SM57 and a 421. It's not really what I want to use in this circumstance, so let's just go through the mic. So condenser 201 sounds a bit muddy. Dynamic 906 sounds a bit like a bag of bees. Dynamic 7 SM7B sounds pretty good. Ribbon. Oh, woof, 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 woof on the bottom end there. And finally, the combination that I settled on, which seems apparently to be quite a popular nu metal combination in the studio. I mean, I don't like using the term nu metal, but hey, the SM57 and a Neumann U87 together gives a very clear, yet quite authoritative kind of tone. So the two of them together, with that couple of percentage of variation on the phase, is a monster. Now, let's just turn that off. If we hit play in stereo on both of them, so that's copying the settings across, essentially. That's getting pretty meta. Now, the problems arise when you unsolo it and try and throw that into a mix. This is what happens. That sounds good, but it's kind of muddy in the low end compared to the rest of the instruments. And that's a lot of what mixing is. It's compared to the rest of the instruments and blending them together. Because what can sound good on its own can sound absolutely shocking when put together with its little friends. So one thing that I like to do, and that I would do first rather than last in a real amp situation, is I like to put a tube screamer in front of the amplifier. Now, TSC Audio make the TSC 808, and that is free. And with the drive down and the volume up, what this does is it kind of scoops out the bass a little bit in the distortion of the tone. Not like an EQ though. That's the interesting bit. If I was to just put an EQ on these heavy guitars to take out the low end, it wouldn't sound more focused. But because I put this in before the amp, so pre-distortion, it changes the way the distortion works. That's the important bit. Because that changes the way the distortion works, that changes, well, everything. Now I put that on the other side as well, and suddenly that goes from kind of a mushy, woolly tone to better. Now I've grouped these two together and put them through hard left, hard right, and put them through a stereo bus channel. Well, an aux channel, a send channel, whatever you want to call it, they go through their own thing. So if I just solo that, if I bypass that EQ, again, that sounds good on its own, which is where mixing comes in, and this is where I need to snap that out and show you this, because this is now the most important thing. Let's just take away the word pool line because that's starting to get annoying. I just deleted me. No, I'm gonna repaste me. Okay, so let's just minimize that because that's a pain. So this EQ that you can see is pretty extreme, and I didn't just throw this on, I used my ears, which is an often maligned kind of phrase. It doesn't mean don't learn about things or don't learn the rules. It means once you know the rules, don't just read off a textbook. So let's listen to this guitar. You can see when I play back that around 7-8k there's a massive drop off. But if you look closely around 10k, it's not all gone. And if you look around this area in the bass, 50, 100, there's tons of crap in there that's just getting in the way of the mix. And if you're thinking, yeah, but what about that chug, chug, chug bass? Well, yes, but that is actually a little higher up than you think, because if it was that low down, it just interferes with everything. So the first thing to do is put in a low shelf, or high pass, depending on how you want to see it, around 100 Hz. So it's gone up on this to 117, just because it's quite a bassy amp. So suddenly that sounds better and in a mix. Okay, so now we get to the point where we're talking specifics and a couple of dB here and there. Next thing that I'll do, this is what I normally do, is I take out above a certain frequency. And again, as a rule of thumb, I'll use something around 10 kilohertz. In this case, I've used more like 13, 14k, but I've still taken out the high stuff because it was just shredding and grating and making the cymbals sound nasty. There's a good trick. Rather than making your cymbals compromise, if the heavy guitars have got all this frequency in, you can afford to take some out. So suddenly The heavy guitars sound less nasty on the highs, but it's not very clear now. And that's where we have to go back into our other bands. Another thing is there's a very nasty frequency around 4K, so I've just taken 6 dB out of 4K with a very narrow band, and you can see it's quite a big dip there. So the guitars are sounding pretty beasty now, but they've lost their edge. This is where it gets quite interesting, because most of the EQing that I do now is boosts rather than cuts. And a lot of guys think that's insane, but what's important is I've done the cuts at the important frequencies to get rid of the bad stuff. So now a gentle push at the right frequencies shouldn't hurt. So the first thing listening to this is the high end needs a big kick. So that's this 5 or 6K boost, which on its own wouldn't work, but with the 4K cut and the top cut, this then makes up for those cuts by bringing that sharp definition out without being nasty. So that's... I'll give you a quick before and after at this point. Getting there now. What have we got left? So I put just below 2K in. There's quite a big kind of hump, just to make that kind of vocally range stand out, because at the moment it's sounding quite new metal and quite scooped, and I just like to bring a little bit of the mids back in that case, because in 2016 that kind of scoopy mid kind of style is not really in fashion, but I like the heavy sound of a dual rectifier, so to make up for it I bring that back a little. Sounding pretty good. Now, because we've scooped all that bass out, I will just add a little hump around 150 Hz, just so that those chug chug chugs get that guts back. But without the really low end just muddying everything up. And last but not least, I've put a tiny bit back in around 300 Hz because this guitar was suddenly sounding a little weak. Now this suddenly looks like overall I've boosted everything, and to a point that's kind of true, but you would never have been able to get that smooth kind of curve without a couple of boosts here, a couple of dips there. And I'll just show you one last time before I go, the before and after. And there you have it. So with a free trial of Reaper, which actually after 60 days asks you to pay but doesn't shut down, and a free trial of 2 Notes Wall of Sound, which if you pay €8, come on, for one cab, as well as the 2 that it comes with, so then you'd have a 3 cab selection to choose from. That's then free for life, and you have everything that you need. Full stop. Done. I hope this has been of use to you. Hit that like button, get subscribed. If there's anything else you'd like to see me do, or any complaints or snarky moaning that you got, let me know. Say in the comments, send me a message, do whatever you want, but interact with us. Give us that like. Thanks for watching. I'm Steel for the Hot Pole.